So this video is going to be about soul characteristics. The first characteristic I want to talk about is the spiritual fact that the soul is said to be eternal. In other words, it exists only within eternity. So this warrants a number of explanations. So to try to convey this idea, we're going to talk about what is impermanent, what is not the soul or not consciousness itself. Our impermanent mortal self exists only within time, whereas the soul itself exists only within eternity. Our physical bodies are impermanent and time-bound. The whole of our psyche is impermanent and time-bound, meaning the realm of emotion, desire, and thought. That's all impermanent, that's all circumstantial, even conventional, and time-bound, exists only within time. Our sense of being the person we believe we are, our I, or the whole of our ego and everything it comprises, is absolutely impermanent and time-bound, exists only within time, meaning that it has a birth and a death, like any other such phenomena. It has a moment of first emergence and a moment of final disappearance, and in between those two moments, this can be measured in a time manner. And in between first emergence and final disappearance, all phenomena, including the whole of our person, the whole of our ego, is always in a constant state of change. From one moment to the next, it is always changing somehow, even if those changes are sometimes impossible to perceive in a sensory manner. So, when we talk about the soul in contrast, we're saying that the soul is eternal. What we mean by that is not something like never-ending time. Because again, what is within time is always in a constant state of change and is always passing. It's always passing. Whereas the soul, or consciousness itself, is not something that passes. It is always now, meaning eternal now. One way to try to understand or realize this within is to simply try to observe that we can only be conscious in the now. It's impossible, and it makes no sense to try to be conscious in the past or in the future. Consciousness is always now, in the eternal. In other words, eternal now. So eternity does not mean never-ending time. It means that it's never really changing. It is always what it is. Another way to try to convey the idea that the soul only exists in or within eternity is to see how the law of eternal motion applies to it. The law of eternal, universal, omnipresent motion is a basic, absolutely fundamental law that concerns all of existence, the whole of existence. Eternal motion, meaning that nothing in existence is ever at a state of complete rest. Everything is always in a motion somehow. So I've mentioned that all phenomena, including the whole of our personal self, all phenomena is always in a constant state of change. A constant state of change between first emergence and final disappearance, and the whole of these changes in between can be measured by time, can be measured in time. Whereas we're saying that the soul is not something which changes, which is why we are saying that it only exists in the eternal now. Now, the law of eternal motion also applies to the realm of the soul, to the realms that exist within eternity, so realm of the soul and what is also above the soul, because there are things in existence which exist beyond or above the soul, if we can say that. But we're not saying that these things are in a state of change, because they are not. The law of eternal motion concerning phenomena that we can know and understand and perceive, the law of eternal motion for these things can be called constant change. But concerning the soul, it is not constant change. It is rather it is rather movement or motion in beingness, not in change. In other words, the soul is always what it is, but its motion, how the law of eternal motion applies to it, is more like a motion in beingness. So the soul has that eternal tendency towards expansion. So it seeks, in a sense, to be ever more what it is. It is a motion or movement in beingness, not one of change, but one of being more of what it is, of a tendency to be more of what it is. So a movement in beingness in this sense, and I know it's very abstract, but still in this sense, is a movement not in change, but in beingness. So it is only within the eternal now, because there is no change by which some kind of time element can be measured. All things pertaining to the soul and things that we say are eternal are very difficult to explain with words, because words and concepts are part of our phenomenal, time-bound and impermanent world. So they are inadequate to describe with precision what exists in realms such as the realm of the soul. But we have no choice, right? So we clumsily try to explain or convey a sense of what is the soul, but this has to be realized. It cannot really be understood conceptually speaking. It cannot be fully or perfectly understood. That's impossible. It has to be realized beyond the mere use of words and concepts. And this is one of the main goals of the spiritual path, the realization of the nature of consciousness, of what is our real self, our soul. This realization is beyond words and is beyond the realm of the conceptual. So, again, the soul exists only within eternity, always or ever within the eternal now, and so it makes no sense for soul consciousness to be attached to stuff that was in the past or possible stuff that may happen in the future. And in various religions, such as Buddhism, for example, we try to convey a sense of being detached from impermanent stuff, detached from what may have happened in the past or what may happen in the future, not because it is a morally good or it is a good value or is something sort of nice to cultivate. Those philosophies try to convey detachment and to not attach oneself and not attach ourselves to impermanent things because of the nature of consciousness or the soul. It is the nature of the soul that makes certain virtues really virtuous things to cultivate. It is not morality, it is truth or reality. We're cultivating, or we're trying to cultivate certain qualities because they have to do with the nature of the soul. So authentic spirituality is about the truth. It's not about beliefs, it's not about a sense of morality that comes from other people or that comes from books or that comes from the typical religious sense. Authentic spirituality has to do with the truth of things, with how things are. And this is why so-called enlightenment, or self-realization, or the realization of the nature of our true self, is ever beyond words, ever beyond beliefs, and is not ultimately bound to any belief system whatsoever, and is always going to remain free from anything that comes from the past.